Well, my name is Steve Ridgel, and I want to spend a couple of minutes this morning telling you about a small church I love. I've worked for a number of years for Herald of Truth, and I preached all over the country, all over the world, and I've been out most Sundays, probably 20 or 25 Sundays a year, a lot of years. But when I was there's a little Church of Christ in Winters, Texas, that when they would lose a preacher, they'd call me to fill in, and I'd preach when I was in town. Oh, every, 4 or 5 times probably over the last 25 years. I've gone down and spent anywhere from 3 months to maybe a year doing interim preaching for that church in Winters, that little Church of Christ in Winters, Texas, about 40 miles south of Abilene. And I want to tell you why I love that little church. Winters is a small town, and like a lot of small towns all over, but out here in West Texas, really true, they're having a hard time staying viable as a town, like every little town does. And that, of course, impacts the church too. They've had a lot of strong members who have moved off to the city, larger cities, whatever, and so that makes it tough. But that little church has hung on and stayed, and they're not as big as they used to be, but I want to tell you, I've watched that little church for a long time. And I'm going to tell you three things that make that a strong, viable church. So if you're hearing this, watching this, and you're a member of a small church, maybe these three things will help you realize what will make your small church viable for a long, long time. Number one, they've got a really good eldership. I don't just mean they have elders, because sometimes in a small church that's hard to do, but this church has 4 men who serve as their elders, and they are involved in the lives of people, and they care, and they reach out, and they actively shepherd, and they study scripture. They do a lot of the teaching, and they even do the fill-in preaching. And these guys are not professional preachers. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they're really good shepherds, which makes them really good elders. And so I have a lot of respect for them. And in fact, there's several young families at that church that we adore. My wife absolutely adores those girls. And I'm going to tell you, I expect at least a couple of those guys someday to be elders. They're already being groomed and trained. And so that church has leadership for a long time. And I believe churches stay viable when the elders are the strong leadership, not looking for a preacher to provide that leadership. And so I think they're set up because they have good leadership. Number two, they're a for church, not an against church. For, not against. I go to a lot of little towns and I see churches getting smaller, and it's like they huddle up and have determined the only thing to do is play defense and keep saying, we don't believe in, we're against, we're not going to do, and congratulate themselves on holding on to truth while they shrink. Now, I'm not saying that the Winters Church doesn't have convictions and solid theology, because I believe they do. But here's what they have. They spend a whole lot more time talking about what they are for. And they're for Jesus. That's who they're for. Boy, they are a Jesus church, and they talk about we want to live like Jesus. We want to tell people about Jesus. And that kind of leads to my third thing. They're an evangelistic church. Over the years, as I've been with that Winters Church, I'm going to tell you, they baptized several people that didn't know Jesus, brought several people into the kingdom, and they've helped bring several people back, people that once were Christians and drifted off, that they've brought back. And they do that because they really love each other, and they adopt people. I mean, boy, if you're baptized at Winters, they throw you a party. They have a fellowship meal and celebrate your baptism, and boy, they get up and pray over people that come back. And man, when somebody gets sick or somebody dies, they rally around. They are a giving, loving, outreach church who's for Jesus and has really strong leadership. So you know what? I don't know if they'll shrink down to 15 people and Winters will be 300 people over the next 50 years. But I can tell you this, they'll still be there standing for Jesus. So Winters, I've always loved the time I get to come down and spend with you. So thanks for letting Marcia and I be part of your church family. We love you, and God bless you always.